A few weeks ago, I had the opportunity to interview Jon Kitley of KRYPT.com at the book release party for his brand new book, Discover the Horror. I have it right here. This was before I had actually read the book. It was just sort of a promotional interview to get people interested in checking out the book, and it certainly got me interested. I bought a copy, I read a copy, and now I'm here to talk a bit about it. But before I get to that, I want to talk about a couple of episodes, incidents, I guess that conveys a little bit more gravity, a little more seriousness than what they actually are. But things that happened after I read the book between that time and recording this video that I think speak to the importance of Jon Kitley's book, Discover the Horror. The first is that I had an interview with Issa Lopez, who is a Mexican filmmaker, a writer-director who has a new film coming out next month called Tigers Are Not Afraid. And during this interview, we were discussing why it is that her film won the equivalent of some Golden Globes and some Oscars over in Mexico. It is definitely a horror film, a supernatural thriller, as Ed Wood might call it, and it's a very touching, moving film that has some disturbing elements involving children, and it's a great callback to the early films of Guillermo del Toro. But it's definitely a horror film, there's no mistaking it. But why is it that that film is kind of stuck in a horror ghetto, if you will, when it comes to finding distribution and interest from festivals and anywhere except her native country? And she said that there's a stigma still about horror movies and how they need to be rebranded as thrillers or elevated horror, as if there's something about horror that needs to be elevated, that it is somehow an illegitimate genre. The second, and by the way, you can listen to that interview next month when the film comes out. I'll have more details on kickseat.com. She was a fantastic interview, and the movie is, it's in my top 3 of the year, even though, yes, it's a horror film. The second is in relation to a screening notice, a preview screening for It Chapter 2 that I received, and I was getting some folks together to talk about it afterwards. That'll be coming up in a couple of weeks too. And one of my colleagues bowed out because he's not a horror guy, as he mentioned, which is odd to me because horror is an expansive genre. It means many different things. It can encompass everything from slasher movies where teenagers at camps get hacked to bits. It can be a deeply personal Mexican set thriller involving children trying to survive the drug war, as Tigers Are Not Afraid proves. It could also encompass the brand new movie that's getting some positive reaction from horror fans, Ready or Not, which I didn't personally respond to that well, but it's definitely a horror film. So to say that you're not into an entire genre it's kind of eyebrow raising. I once knew someone who said that they didn't like science fiction when I asked them if they'd ever seen Alien. It's a very strange position to have, I think, especially as someone who loves film, who loves the art form, to completely shut off or wall off thousands upon thousands of movies because of a stigma. Now, I don't know all the personal reasons for disliking this when it comes to this particular person. Consider him a friend and a fantastic critic, but it's just some eyebrow-raising, head-scratching stuff. And again, I'm not passing judgment, I'm just trying to illustrate that there are people out there who consider horror to be sort of a less than film genre. And what I love about Discover the Horror is that Jon Kitley makes a fantastic case for turning that around, for educating people. Now, Jon Kitley runs Kitley's Crypt at kitleyscrypt.com, which is, I believe, the oldest horror website on the internet. He's been doing it for a long time. And his site has evolved over the years to the point where now his main mission is to educate people about the horror genre. He goes to conventions, he keeps up with the site, he does everything. He appears to be everywhere, and he knows everybody, particularly here in the Chicagoland area. I've seen him at conventions and different events for years, but we've never really had a proper discussion until the interview that I did a few weeks back. So it was really great to sit down and read a book by someone that I kind of know and who knows a lot of people that I know in the horror community, and to find out what he's thinking, like what got him into this, why is he obsessed with horror, and he truly is obsessed, and I mean that in the best, probably healthiest way. And the book starts out from his childhood up through his teen years and his adulthood, and he's pretty much experienced horror from every aspect that you can, aside from actually being chased through the woods by a knife-wielding maniac. Although maybe that's going to be in volume 2, who knows? But he worked at a movie theater where he met his future wife. He has some great chapters about horror movie conventions and the drive-in movie experience, and what a shame that is that we've lost that. He talks a lot about encountering horror celebrities and the culture of horror conventions, which, if you are not in the know, yes, there are horror conventions, just there are sci-fi conventions and comic book conventions. He has a lot of flattering things to say about them, especially earlier in the early days, where you could go and meet icons of the genre like George Romero from Night of the Living Dead, and Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell, Dario Argento. You could go to a convention and put as much stuff as you wanted in front of them and they would sign it for free. Whereas nowadays, you go to conventions like Wizard World, which opens up, I believe, today in Chicago, and some autograph prices range from $30 to $120, and that's only to get something signed. There's photographers' fees and all this other crazy stuff, plus admission. So the culture has definitely shifted. And Kitley, much like me, we are both very disappointed in this development. And his passion for the horror genre really comes across in every page. And I feel like, even though I don't really know him, the telling of Discover the Horror is so intimate. I feel like I'm riding along in vans cross country to go to a New York horror convention and getting stuck in the snow, as an early Fangoria story that he told. I feel like I'm setting up tables in a small movie theater with a handful of other vendors, hoping to make enough money to justify the weekend. I feel like I'm at a drive-in, setting up and seeing my son go and meet one of his filmmaking heroes who showed up for an event. I mean, that's not true, obviously, because I'm not the father to Kitley's son, but I do have my own son, and it made me aspire to have that kind of relationship, to be able to share that kind of passion with horror with him. The book is told in a very kind of matter-of-fact, no-holds-barred, opinionated style. It's like talking to a best friend, perhaps a best friend that you've never met. I don't really have any criticisms of the book, although there are a few typos throughout that. It's kind of, as a reader, as a grammar junkie, I was like, maybe a second pass or so. But other than that, it's a perfect read, and one of those books that, when it was over, I didn't want it to end. As I got closer and closer to the last chapter, I got that dread, that tingling horror sensation that it was all going to be over soon, and sure enough, it was. But he teased. I think he did make a joke, or hopefully it's not a joke, but somewhere in the book, that he had some more stories for a second volume, so it'd be very cool if he did. But this book essentially covers about 50 years of this man's life, and is absolutely worth checking out, not only just for the stories, but for the wealth of reference. He talks about so many films. He talks about horror films the way Quentin Tarantino talks about every film. And he also admits that he knows a lot about horror, but he's also met people that can talk him under the table, as it were, as far as expertise. And that's not a point of jealousy, it's a point of admiration on his part. He wants to learn as much as he can. He wants to meet as many people as he can, and evangelize, to spread the word of this genre that he loves so much. So there are lots of chapters devoted to specific genres and subgenres of horror, like Italian horror, Mexican horror, Spanish horror. I mean, he breaks everything down, and he gives a lot of fantastic examples of movies to check out if you are just starting out. I've been a horror fan, or at least I thought I was, since I was a kid, but it turns out that there is so much more to learn about the genre and the people involved in making these films, and their importance to film history, not just to horror film history, but their legacy as filmmakers, and the innovations that other people have kind of borrowed from, or copied, and put into more legit films, if you will. He mentions a lot of reference books because that's kind of what he's passionate about. He sells a lot of those at conventions through Kitley's Crypt. Yeah, I've definitely got some homework to do. As you may know, if you follow Kicking the Seats podcast at kickseat.com or iTunes or Stitcher, I got to get a shameless plug in there while I'm plugging someone else's work, of course. Then you'll know that I've been doing a series for the last year or so called Scuola Argento, where I sit down with Aaron Christensen and some other friends to talk about the films of Dario Argento. And Aaron figures heavily into the book, and I've got to pick his brain about some of these misadventures he's gotten up to with Jon Kitley. But that series where I'm being indoctrinated into this world of Italian horror is also kind of a continuation, even though I didn't know it yet because I hadn't read the book, of what Jon Kitley was trying to do, which is to get people who love the genre to share that knowledge with people, and talk to them about it, and help them to explore something they had no idea about, and find the richness and the meaning in these films that can be easily written off by large numbers of people because they're not mainstream. Some of them, sometimes you'll catch lightning in a bottle and they'll be mainstream horror successes, but this goes way beyond franchise films, beyond Nightmare on Elm Street, beyond Friday the 13th, beyond Paranormal Activity. And as Kitley mentions, there's nothing wrong with just being into those kinds of movies as long as you're into the genre. But if you do want to go a bit deeper or a lot deeper, there's tons of resources out there, people willing to go on that journey with you. So again, discover the horror. I hope that you will discover the horror. You can find the book on Amazon.com. You can go to kitley'scrypt.com and actually order a copy and have it signed. I highly recommend that. Buy two, get one signed, and then get one to read and to beat up on the bus, as I did, and the train. It's a really quick, engrossing read, and I can't recommend it enough. So yeah, check it out, and keep loving the genre. Oh, by the way, I'm wearing my Kitley's Crypt T-shirt. I don't know if you can quite see that, but yeah, that was from the book release party. So I'm completely nerding out over this book, and I apologize if this is embarrassing to watch, but I just wanted to share this with you. I highly recommend it, and yeah, that's all. Until next time, whenever that is, whatever that is. Thanks very much, and oh, be sure and like, subscribe, and share this video if you like it. If you don't like it, feel free to comment. If you do like it, feel free to comment. Up vote, down vote, however you want to do it. I appreciate the engagement, and yeah, take care.